Amtrak is here. We deliver. We're on time, and we're the new choice of the traveling public.
Because we're ushering in a whole new era, ladies and gentlemen, in transportation in the greatest country in the world.
Amtrak plans to run the train at 150 miles an hour for part of the way.
The train's cars are designed to actually tilt up to 4 degrees when going around the curve.
This gives the United States its first rail line similar to high-speed trains in Europe and Japan.
Today, we are going to say hello to the very first high-speed train as it makes its first stop right here in New York City.
The train was unbelievable. It was the best ride I have ever had.
Amtrak's next generation Acela train has reached speeds up to 165 miles per hour. These trains will soon replace the Amtrak Acela trains that have served the Northeast corridor for decades.
So imagine over the last 20 years, all of the developments and all of the technological advancements that the rail industry has experienced.
Alstom is building 28 of the new Acela train sets projected to enter service in 2021.
We're currently testing the trains. You know, it takes a bit of time to get all the safety authorization for a train of that complexity.
With a year of record airline delays, overcrowding, strikes, and customer complaints, the time seems right for Amtrak to strike. To find out if Americans are finally ready to embrace rail travel, now available at 150 miles per hour.
Please exit through the rear door.
As always, thanks to my patrons. Your donations make this content possible. Now in this video, I'm going to be calling the Acela service high-speed rail a lot, and while it's one of the slowest high-speed rail services in the world, it is high-speed rail. Now, it is true that there's only 50 miles of track where the Acela can reach 150 miles per hour. Now some people take this as, when it's not running at 150 miles per hour, it has to be running at like 60 miles per hour, or I don't know, 80 miles per hour, something like that. I feel like people see all the slow sections of the Northeast corridor and think that that's what sums up the entire corridor. And it's a shame because out of the 7 states, it's really just the state of Connecticut that drags this corridor down. Through the rest of the states, the Acela cruises at 125 miles per hour, 135 miles per hour, even 140 sometimes. You know, there are other numbers between 150 and 125, and I don't really think that it's really people's fault for believing this, because this is unfortunately how the US legislation is set up. Let me break it down to you just in case you're unfamiliar about what I'm talking about. In the US, we have class certification requirements. These are imposed and regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, and let me just start by saying this: the US legal definition of high-speed rail. Under Title 49, US Code Section 26105, definitions, the term high-speed rail means all forms of non-highway ground transportation that run on rails or electromagnetic guideways providing transportation service which is A. reasonably expected to reach sustained speeds of more than 125 miles per hour, and B. made available to members of the general public as passengers. High-speed rail regulations in the US is somewhat of a recent phenomenon. It's actually kind of funny because every single time there's a faster high-speed rail line proposed or being built, the regulation needs to change to support the faster service. It's almost like the FRA didn't plan for high-speed rail to actually get built. The point of me showing you this is to show you that a lot of the Northeast corridor is actually Class 8 track, aka track that's over 125 miles per hour. And I think that this FRA track class certification is partially responsible for why people believe that the track speeds jump on the Northeast corridor. Despite the Amfleets being based off the Metroliners, which were designed to go 150 miles per hour, and the ACS 64 being designed to go 135 miles per hour, those vehicles, and every other vehicle in the United States, is rated as a Tier 1 vehicle. Tier 1 vehicles are conventional rail vehicles, and all Tier 1 vehicles have a max speed of 125 miles per hour. Tier 2 vehicles, on the other hand, are rated as a max speed of 150 miles per hour. The first gen Acela is currently the only Tier 2 rated vehicle in the United States. Essentially, the Acela is the first and only high-speed rail service in the US. So yes, America built the first high-speed rail line 24 years ago. Neither BrightlineWest or California High-Speed Rail will be the first high-speed rail service. They're both about 3 decades late, which is pretty insane when you think about it. 3 decades to build the next high-speed rail line? Crazy. But what BrightlineWest and California High-Speed Rail are actually racing to do is building the first dedicated high-speed rail infrastructure, which is still amazing in its own right. But to say you're the first high-speed rail service, even when still using the words ultra or true as adjectives, I think that's a little bit problematic, because you end up creating this notion that high-speed rail in America is some crazy concept that has never happened before. People start thinking, oh well, I gotta go to Europe or I gotta go to Asia to experience this because that's the only place where it really works. Which is A, false, and B, an overall negative mindset to look at high-speed rail in America.
Schedule a meeting. Take the shuttle, then cross your fingers. Schedule a meeting. Take Amtrak's Metroliner, then cross your legs. Metroliner, the smarter shuttle.
5 years after Amtrak took over operation of passenger services on the Northeast Corridor, in 1976, Congress authorized an overhaul of the Northeast Corridor between Washington and Boston. The program was called the Northeast Corridor Improvement Project. This included safety improvements, modernization of the signaling system, and new centralized electrification and traffic control centers. This upgrade also allowed more trains to run faster and closer together, and would prove critical for the latter stage of high-speed rail operation on the Northeast Corridor. The Northeast Corridor Improvement Project included the creation of the AEM-7, which to this day has been one of Amtrak's most reliable locomotives. And with the introduction of the AEM-7, the Northeast Corridor Improvement Project set travel time goals between New York and Washington at 2 hours and 40 minutes, and between Boston and New York at 3 hours and 40 minutes. Travel times that still haven't been met today.
Same old place, we'll have you sing our brand new train. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard Amtrak.
In the late 1970s, Amtrak was in the progress of investigating high-speed service on the Northeast Corridor, especially between New York City and Boston. This portion of the line was infamously known for its numerous curves and the fact that it wasn't electrified, so Amtrak would investigate a foreign train set with tilting capabilities. In January 1977, Amtrak signed a $10 million lease agreement for 2 LRC trains from the Canadian manufacturer Bombardier, with 1 locomotive and 5 cars each, with an option to buy the trains at any time or return them after the 2 years were up. The LRC-1 batch for Amtrak was completed in the fall of 1980. They were used on the Beacon Hill service from New Haven to Boston and the Shoreliner service from New York to Boston. In testing, they were able to take a 60-mile-per-hour curve for conventional trains at 89.6 miles per hour and reaching a top speed of 117 miles per hour. However, by 1982, Amtrak declined to take over the trains and they were returned to Bombardier. But despite them not taking up the LRC at that point in time, there was at least some consideration of an electric locomotive version of the same basic design.
New super train from Sweden today. The train has executive suites and can clock up to 150 miles an hour, but Amtrak's signaling system will only let it go to 125 miles an hour. It can also round curves without having to slow down. Gary Papa's kind of train. The public will get a chance to test this new train from February to June. Amtrak considering purchasing a fleet of these trains to replace its aging Metroliner system, but right now only a third of the funding has been secured.
In 1992, Congress passed the Amtrak Authorization and Development Act requiring Amtrak to establish high-speed rail service between Boston and New York City. The goal was to reduce the travel time between these two cities from 4.5 hours to 3 hours. A major part of this project was electrifying the entire Northeast Corridor so that high-speed trains can run from Boston to Washington, D.C. This meant that the section from New Haven to Boston would have to be electrified. Before Amtrak would pour hundreds of millions of dollars into electrifying the corridor, Amtrak leased 2 high-speed train sets from Europe. A Swedish X2000 and a German ICE-1 were the 2 train sets chosen by Amtrak to conduct tests on the Northeast Corridor. For Amtrak, the goal was to test the southern section of the Northeast Corridor from Washington, D.C. to New Haven to see how much work would be needed in order to make high-speed trains viable on the section that is already electrified. For ABB, the manufacturer of the X2000, and Siemens, the manufacturer of the ICE-1, their goal was to hopefully get a contract to have their high-speed train models exported to the United States for this new proposed high-speed rail service under Amtrak. The purpose of these train sets was to analyze how much work needed to be done on the existing corridor. And not just physical improvements to the corridor, but improvements to customer service and service reliability. Other than that, this was mostly a publicity stunt by Amtrak in order to create some enthusiasm about high-speed rail in America. Now, the reason that Amtrak specifically chose these train sets is because both of these train sets are used on conventional rail lines in Europe. Therefore, these train sets were more appealing to Amtrak than the Shinkansen of Japan or the TGV of France. But it should be noted that Amtrak already knew that there wasn't an off-the-shelf high-speed rail train set that could be used on the Northeast Corridor. This means that whatever manufacturer that wins the bid to build the high-speed train set would need to come up with something completely new for the American market. The X2000 is a Swedish electric tilting train that began service on the 283-mile route between Stockholm and Gothenburg in 1990. Upon its introduction, the train cut the 4.5-hour-long journey between the two cities into just 3 hours. If you remember, these time reductions are similar to the time reductions that Amtrak was proposing for their high-speed service. On top of that, Sweden, just like the US, has a lot of curves in their railway lines, and the country wasn't prepared yet in investing in new high-speed rail lines solely for passenger service. This means that they needed a tilting train set in order to provide a significant advantage over the existing passenger rail services. Tilting trains can run around short radius curves at up to 15% faster than non-tilting trains, all while maintaining passenger comfort. Speaking of non-tilting, the IC1 was the first commercially produced German high-speed train set and began service a year after the X2000 in 1991. Upon its introduction, these trains ran on a mix of high-speed and conventional rail lines in Germany, which again was the main reason why it was chosen for the test on the Northeast Corridor. In normal service, these train sets consist of 2 power cars and up to 14 intermediate cars. However, it should be noted that only 2 power cars and 6 intermediate cars were sent to America. The 6 intermediate cars consist of 1 first-class car, where half of the train's seating configuration was in the 2+1 arrangement, and the other half comprised of 3 personal compartments with 5 seats each, and had a capacity of 48 passengers. 3 second-class cars that were also divided into 2 main areas, one part with 2 toilets and 4 passenger compartments with 6 seats each, and the other part fitted into rows in a 2-2 seating arrangement, with 6 tables between them, and capacity for 66 passengers in each car. 1 restaurant car, which includes a dining area with 8 tables and 24 seats in a 2+1 configuration. And last but not least, a service car, which has 2 wheelchair spaces, a wheelchair accessible toilet that has a changing table, wider doors for more accessibility, a phone booth because it's the 90s, a conference room with a large table, 4 freely movable chairs, an electronic typewriter, a fax machine, a telephone, and power sockets. Power sockets might not seem that big of a deal, but again, it's the 90s. The rest of the seats have a similar seating layout as the second-class cars, but there was also a compartment and a restroom for the employees of the restaurant car. The capacity of the car is 45 passengers. This makes for a total capacity of 291 passengers, excluding the restaurant car. The X2000 consists of a power car, 4 or 5 intermediate cars, and 1 cab car. It should be noted that only 4 intermediate cars were sent to America. The intermediate cars consist of 4 first-class coaches and a bistro car in the middle of the consist. The train has 4,370 horsepower. In testing, the train reached a top speed of 171 miles per hour. This was done by replacing the cab car with a secondary power car, doubling its horsepower. But in regular service with only 1 power car, the train is relegated to 125 miles per hour. However, in operations with Amtrak, the train was allowed to run at 135 miles per hour. It should be noted that both train sets kept their original paint schemes while in service with Amtrak. The only difference in the paint scheme would be the words Amtrak applied on the trains. The Swedish X2000 train sets are made with stainless steel, while the German ICE train sets are made with aluminum silicone alloy. Unfortunately for Amtrak, the ICE-1 train sets did not come with tilting technology, but with 2 power cars, the ICE absolutely dwarfs the X2000 in horsepower, with a power output of 12,874 horsepower. This also means that the train set had very fast acceleration and could reach a top speed of 175 miles per hour, though these trains were relegated to slower speeds as well. The X2000 was placed into Metroliner service from February until May of 1993, and then from August to September of 1993. ICE service along the corridor didn't start till April. Both train sets would be applauded by passengers for their smooth ride and comfortability. However, in the end of the day, Amtrak will come out on top as the main winner. as their Metroliner tests and their goals in getting Americans enthusiastic in high-speed rail were both successful. Unfortunately for the manufacturers, both ABB and Siemens would have their trains sent back without any confirmed orders from Amtrak. It wouldn't be until 20 years later that Siemens would get orders for equipment on the Northeast Corridor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome America's first high-speed express train, Acela.
Following the electrification between New Haven and Boston for Acela service with electric locomotives between the two cities began on January 31st, 2000. The project took 4 years and cost close to $2.3 billion. $1.3 billion were spent on the infrastructure improvements, and close to $1 billion were spent on the new Acela train sets and the Bombardier HHP-8 locomotives, also known as the Pig and the Hippo. Amtrak enjoyed the power of the ICE-1, but also enjoyed the tilting capabilities of the X2000. So what would happen if they mixed the two together? When Amtrak sent out the request for bids to manufacture the train set, 3 manufacturers submitted their proposals. The 3 manufacturers were ABB, the manufacturers of the X2000, Siemens, the manufacturer of the ICE-1, and a consortium of Bombardier and Jack Alstom, now solely known as Alstom. And out of the 3 proposals, Bombardier and Alstom seemed kinda random, but they had a plan. What happens if you take Bombardier's LRC train and combine them with Jack Alstom's TGV? Nothing great, I can tell you that already, in case you're still wondering. But Amtrak didn't care. Bombardier and Jack Alstom were the cheapest bid. And it wouldn't be America if we didn't always go with the cheapest bid, despite any of the negative ramifications that would follow behind it. The consortium of 75% Bombardier and 25% Jack Alstom was selected in March 1996. And this is what we ended up getting out of it. Believe it or not, the Acela wasn't originally the plan. Originally, the service was supposed to be called the American Flyer and look like this. And overall, I gotta respect the end product because it actually stayed pretty close to its original rendering. I mean, aside from the livery, what's really different? I mean, the marker lights are in a different position, and the cars reach the profile of the power cars instead of the opposite way around, but overall, I think this rendering is pretty lore accurate. A pilot train set was completed in early 2000 and sent to the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado for testing in June 2000, with an inaugural VIP run for the Acela occurring 5 months later on November 16th, 2000. The Acela made its first revenue run on December 11th, 2000, a year behind schedule. A year. One singular year behind schedule. Just want to preface that. But yeah, only a year behind schedule for America's first high-speed train? That's pretty impressive. What's not impressive is the reason for why it was delayed. Remember when I said, and it wouldn't be America if we didn't always go with the cheapest bid, despite any of the negative ramifications that would follow behind it. First off, the trains were delivered late, with Bombardier blaming Amtrak for the delays, citing that Amtrak kept on changing the design specifications, which, maybe Amtrak is at fault for that. Maybe. But then once the train sets were delivered, there were cracks found in the brackets holding the shock absorbers. Bombardier said they found a solution to the problem, but that still meant that every single train set had to be pulled out of service one by one to get fixed. And if you thought that was the end of it, then there was a problem with the bathroom doors completely locking passengers in. Now Bombardier blamed this design on Amtrak, saying that it was Amtrak's design in the first place. Even if it was their design, you went through with it, built it, and still delivered the product, knowing that there was something wrong with it. Unfortunately, the clown show just kept on going, because when Bombardier delivered the train sets, they found out that
there seemed to be a problem. It appears we made the trainset 4 inches too wide. Damn.
NANI? And with that, the two parties would scuffle. Legally scuffle. Bombardier definitely not because they're struggling for money, would sue Amtrak for $200 million, citing that the delays for the train set was all Amtrak's fault. They accused Amtrak of continually changing the design specifications for the train set, giving them false information about the loading gauge for the corridor, and overall not improving the infrastructure on the corridor, which I don't really know what they expect there. I mean, you know what you signed up for. Amtrak never said the track quality would change. And you can tell that Bombardier was reaching because Alstom didn't even join them on the lawsuit. Anyways, in a crazy turn of events, Amtrak would countersue. Amtrak would accuse Bombardier for breaking their contract, as there was something in the contract that said that all parties agreed to settle their disputes outside of court. And essentially, the rest of Amtrak's accusations against Bombardier was a big no you. And in the end, Bombardier and Amtrak would both come to the same conclusion. Why are we suing each other? We're both broke. Under their new agreement, all legal claims were dropped, and Amtrak would assume full responsibility for maintaining the 20 Acela train sets, now beginning in October 2006. This is 7 years earlier than originally planned in the original contract, which meant that once 2007 came around, any problems found with the train sets will be completely on Amtrak. And luckily, or unluckily, problems were found before the contract ended. Remember when I said that the brackets for the shock absorbers were cracking? Well, apparently the disc brakes said,
"Ooh, me too, me next."
On April 15th, 2005, Acelas had to be pulled out of service again, not fully re-entering service until later that year. After about 11 years in service, by 2011, the train sets reached half of their lifespan. Amtrak was stuck with a hard decision. Not really. Do we rebuild the train sets, or do we just order new ones? Amtrak would decide to rebuild the train sets.
Oh!
I know. In 2011, Amtrak announced 40 new Acela coaches would be ordered in 2012 to increase capacity of the existing train sets. With this order, Acela trains would be increased from 6 cars to 8. Due to the train set's increased length, Amtrak would be required to modify their existing Acela maintenance facilities in New York, Boston, and in Washington. However, eventually, Mother Nature would end up beating some sense into Amtrak in the form of Hurricane Sandy. The hurricane forced Amtrak to reevaluate their plans financially, with Amtrak finding that it would probably be cheaper to order new train sets. See? And all it took was $70 billion in worldwide damages. Anyways, Amtrak's Acela train sets went under minor refurbishments at the time, replacing the existing fabric on the seats with blue leather. And in January 14th, Amtrak issued a request for proposals for 28 or more new model Acela train sets. This proposal was a combined order with California High-Speed Rail, which would have been great if California High-Speed Rail was even building infrastructure at that point in time. Yeah, California High-Speed Rail didn't even break ground until a year later. It's safe to say that the joint proposal fell through. Alstom was selected as the manufacturer and planned to replace the train sets with the brand new Avelia Liberty. In August 2016, Amtrak announced a $2.4 billion loan from the United States Department of Transportation for the purchase of said train sets. That's right, a loan, not a grant, because the US Department of Transportation can't help but pimp out their own assets instead of actually funding them.
I like when you like this, Daddy.
Yeah, where you put my bag?
Daddy, I like when you scrambling and scraping.
No, I got notes
like
and
that.
shit. I'll be practicing. I got
Anyways, Amtrak would order 28 train sets in order to provide additional frequency. These 8 additional train sets over the existing train sets 20 will help Amtrak provide half-hourly service between Washington and New York. Between February 2020 and March 2020, 2 prototype sets were built. One was sent to the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado, and the other one was sent to Amtrak for testing along the Northeast Corridor. By 2020, the first train set was supposed to be in service, and with all train sets being in service by 2022. Obviously, some interesting events happened between those years, so the production cycle for the train sets took a huge hit. With that being said, it's been 4 years, and there are some problems we need to talk about. And these problems can vary from tiny problems to very large problems. Let's talk about the tiny problems first. So what we're looking at is misaligned ceiling panels and delamination on the floors. Nothing too crazy. I mean, the interior of these train sets haven't been completely utilized yet, as in actually carrying passengers. All the possible problems that might happen may have not just had a chance to happen yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went in service and there were some problems still, like people being locked in bathrooms again. But yeah, let's move on to the larger problems. Alright, so we have water drainage problems between passenger cars that causes components to corrode, leaks in the hydraulic tilting systems, and windows shattering spontaneously. Nice. And to add on to that, there are some other just basic corridor issues, such as the roadbed being pretty bumpy, leading the pantograph to break contact with the catenary, and because of the fact that unlike the first generation Acela, the Avelia Liberty only draws power from one pantograph, meaning that if that pantograph loses connection with the catenary, the train won't be able to accelerate. And at this point in time, Amtrak was starting to get impatient. I mean, the first generation Acelas were falling apart at this point. Literally falling apart. The Avelia Liberty also failed multiple computer simulated tests. The reason why it was failing was because Alstom was having difficulties simulating the track conditions on the Northeast Corridor. Now you may be wondering, why is Alstom struggling with this so much when they already worked on the previous generation Acela? Because Bombardier can't help but sell off all their assets to the French, they ended up selling off their rail sector to Alstom. So with all this information, Alstom should be well equipped to handle the Northeast Corridor. Right? Well, not exactly. Let's bring up the tiers again. We already talked about Tier 1, which is conventional rail up to 125 miles per hour. Tier 2, which is currently only the first generation Acela, has a max speed of 150 miles per hour, now changed to 160 miles per hour with the new Acelas. And then there's Tier 3. Tier 3 vehicles have a max speed of 220 miles per hour on dedicated right-of-way and 125 miles per hour on shared tracks. Now the Avelia Liberty is supposed to be a mixture of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 regulations. And this makes me feel just a little bit bad for Alstom, because the reason the train set is like this is because the FRA was scrambling to create new safety standards. Essentially, the Avelia Liberty created the Tier 3 standard, which is again another example of how Amtrak is leading the way for high-speed rail in America. Anyways, the Tier 3 standard also requires the train sets to be computer tested before allowing passengers to ride them. Tier 2 vehicles did not have to go through this test, meaning Alstom didn't fully have all the information about the corridor from the previous train sets. Now, something interesting about Tier 2 vehicles is that passengers are not able to occupy the lead car of the train set, meaning the train basically needs to be a TGV design in order to run at 160 miles per hour with mixed traffic. And it does explain why Amtrak went with the TGV technology instead of using something like the AGV. Now let me say this, I do remember when Amtrak first announced the Avelia Liberty and posted that video that currently sits at 20 million views. Damn. With the renderings of what the train set will look like, and I was pretty disappointed that we were still using TGV technology. But I was hyped nonetheless because those train sets looked amazing. Even the small model that they showed off was beautiful. And then the real things rolled out.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Somebody gotta say it. These trains are ugly. It's like when you order the SpongeBob ice cream out of the ice cream truck, and then it comes out all, yeah. And I think the reason why I don't like them is because of two things. One, the paint scheme is, what phase is this? Is this phase 6? 7? Oh my gosh. It's like a color palette I would draw with when I was like 4. Who designed this livery? You gotta fire them, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, it was Alstom. Alstom, what happened here? I mean, it's not just that, it's like, even the power cars don't even match the actual trailing cars. It's like, aesthetics went out the window. But in all seriousness, let's start off with the basic thing. The livery itself. I think the black cheat line around the windows was actually doing the train set a huge favor, making it look sleek and modern. Brightline also uses cheat lines on their trains, and I think is mostly the reason why Brightline gets away with calling their trains high-speed rail. The cheat line simply makes the trains look faster. But even in BrightlineWest's Avelia Liberty rendering, they still utilize a cheat line, which in my opinion, makes Brightline's Avelia Liberty look way better than Amtrak's. Now let's talk about the part that I know they'll never fix. The part that literally drives me insane. Why don't the power cars match up with the trailing cars? What is going on there? I mean, it's triggering OCD that I don't even have. And I've seen every excuse in the book for this online.
Well, actually, it's because the power cars don't tilt and the actual trailing cars tilt, so therefore, it doesn't need to be.
What? That makes it even worse. I mean, the train cars stick out 2.5 inches on each side. L aerodynamics. But let me just say what I think happened here. Alstom received orders from both Amtrak and SNCF for a brand new high-speed train model that uses TGV technology. Now, you could design two completely different train sets, or you can share similar design characteristics like dimensions to lower development costs. Alstom promised both Amtrak and SNCF cheaper train sets than the ones that they purchased for the previous generation, and I think that sharing dimensions was the way to accomplish this. And unfortunately, Amtrak's Avelia Liberty got the short end of the stick because SNCF's Avelia Horizon looks fine. And I think the reason is because Alstom wanted to take full advantage of America's larger loading gauge, meaning that the Avelia Liberty has a spacier interior. The power cars are 10 feet wide, and for the Avelia Horizon so is the rest of the train set, but for the Avelia Liberty, the rest of the train set seems to be 10.5 feet, and then tapering down to 9.5 feet near platform level. This is so that the train set can use its full tilting capabilities, unlike the previous generation, which barely tapered at the platform level. And in the end, you end up with this weird mixed matchy train set, which is not the platform level that bothers me so much, it's more of the part that actually sticks out. Like, if that could taper in just a little bit, I think I'd be fine with it. And to further prove that Alstom basically slapped the same power car onto the train sets, let's be honest, what is Amtrak doing with train sets that can reach 186 miles per hour? Never mind 220. Like, just ask yourself, do you think the Acela will reach 186 miles per hour within the Avelia Liberty's lifespan, which we'll say is about 25 years? I don't think it's gonna happen. I mean, we're looking at Amtrak's project completion dates for the Northeast Corridor improvement projects, and even those were set back to 2036, which makes me wonder what would have happened if Amtrak bought a slower high-speed rail train geared more towards the needs of the corridor rather than being geared towards everybody. But in this case, it just seems like Amtrak and SNCF took the cheap route, making Alstom take the cheap route, therefore ending up with a cheaply made, rushed, and incomplete product. And they should be asking themselves, was it really worth it? In the Acela's case, Amtrak already had to retire 4 of the train sets. And it's not by choice, they literally had to. The train sets are falling apart. On top of that, Amtrak also lost $100 million due to the Avelia Liberty problems. This shows that just because a manufacturer has the cheapest bid, doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way. And I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty sure that Alstom is losing money on each train set built. I mean, they already spent like 1/3 of their check just for the supply chain alone. You add on staffing, maintenance of the trains that are breaking down after you just built them. Yeah, it's looking like slim margins, but I'm sure that down the line, like 3 years from now, the train sets are going to be great, but they will probably still be known for one of the most problematic introductions for a new train set.
Who could say no to $2 billion? Florida did. Now several other states are saying, we'll take that money. The money was going to be used to build a high-speed rail line between Tampa and Orlando, but Governor Rick Scott canceled the project.
Florida's loss is New York's and New Jersey's gain.
A governor that rejects transportation dollars is penny wise and pound foolish.
U.S. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood says that in the Northeast, the money will be used to boost power supplies on crucial rail lines. LaHood says this means travel speeds from New York to Washington and New York to Boston will increase within a few years from 135 miles per hour to 160 miles per hour.
For the next hour of this video, we'll be going over the entirety of the Northeast Corridor, highlighting all the improvement projects that Acela passengers will be benefiting from.
Come on and take a free ride. Come on and take me by your side. Come on and take a free ride.
The Acela opened with 15 stops: Washington, D.C. Union Station, Baltimore, Washington International Airport, Baltimore Penn Station, Wilmington, Philadelphia 30th Street Station, Trenton, Metro Park, Newark Penn Station, New York Penn Station, Stamford, New Haven, New London, Providence, Route 128, Boston Back Bay Station, and finally, Boston South Station. With that being said, for this video, we'll be going south to north, starting in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Union Station opened up in 1908 with the Pennsylvania Railroad in partnership with the Baltimore, Ohio. By the way, that's the reason why it's called Union Station, because when two or more railroads come together in partnership for one station, it's a union. So yeah, that's why there's so many of them. Because of Union Station's age, it's gone through many renovations, and throughout the next couple of decades, it's planned to go through a massive one. Currently, the station has 23 tracks. 8 of them are through tracks. The through tracks connect to the First Street Tunnel, so the station has to be split into 2 levels. 14 of the tracks terminate at the top, and 1 of them terminates at the bottom. Since the Acela terminates at Washington, D.C., the service utilizes the upper level terminating tracks. The Acela's terminating pattern will most likely stay the same after the renovation. What won't stay the same is the number of tracks in Washington, D.C. Union Station. The rail terminal will be reconstructed to replace the existing 23 tracks with 19 tracks. And instead of having 8 through tracks, there's only going to be 7, which means instead of the 14 terminating tracks on the top level, there's only going to be 12. Fortunately, these new platforms will be longer, allowing for the double berthing of trains. 2 of the platforms on the lower level will be upgraded to be high-level platforms. This will drastically lower dwelling times, as passengers won't need to lug their heavy suitcases up and down the stairs of the train cars, while also helping mobility impaired passengers board and deboard the train faster, without having to use Amtrak's infamous yellow stool. Now, since the Acelas are high-speed train sets, they don't have low-level boarding. This means that these new high-level platforms can allow for additional operational flexibility, although there will be a wall built splitting the electric trains and the diesel trains, meaning the Acela will mainly stay on its currently assigned platforms. 4 new concourses will be provided to facilitate public access and increase circulation. These new concourses will cover approximately 330,000 square feet. The main concourse, Concourse A, the east-west train hall, will be integrated with the original train hall, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely beautiful. The 1988 Amtrak waiting area, however, yeah, not so much. This new train hall will be approximately 150,000 square feet. Next to the train hall will be a new bus facility. If you didn't already know, Union Station already has an intercity bus facility located in the bottom parking deck of the station's parking garage. And yeah, it's not really that great. It was created more as an afterthought. So even though it's only a decade and a half old, that's the reason why it's being replaced. The new bus facility will be around 122,500 square feet. The integrated bus facility will connect directly to the train hall, facilitating access and intermodal transfers. In normal configuration, the bus facility will have 38 slips. An additional slip could be provided in the island platform if needed, for a total of 39 slips. Let's say there's like an event going on. In times of unusually high demand from tour and charter buses, buses can make use of the deck level pickup and drop-off areas adjacent to the train hall, which would provide the equivalence of 15 bus slips. Buses will access the facility via Northeast H Street and a new intersection on the east side of the H Street Bridge. Buses will exit back on Northeast H Street via a new intersection on the west side of the bridge. I'm not gonna lie, this is way more organized than the current setup. Now you may be asking, what are they gonna do about all the missing parking? What parking? Keep it pushing, you car brain loser. It's actually kind of impressive because this new train station massively cuts down on parking. The new parking space will be at the bottom level of the station, where a new pickup and drop-off area will be located. Access to the pickup and drop-off area, along with the parking facility, will be via ramps on Northeast G Street and Northeast 1st Street. Now get this, the parking facility will have enough space to park approximately 400 to 550 cars. That's a long way down from the current 2,190 parking spots. For-hire vehicles such as taxis, Ubers, and Lyfts can use the pickup and drop-off areas at the downstairs parking facility, the pickup and drop-off area above the bus facility, and the current pickup and drop-off area in front of the station, which makes approximately 60 pickup and drop-off spaces. Planning to use a bike and not an automobile? You might be happy to know that there's parking and storage for approximately 900 bicycles, which is up from its current 180 parking spaces. Storage will be provided in the 8th Street concourse. There will also be around 100 bike sharing spots. Pedestrians could access Washington Union Station or WUS through various locations. including the existing Metrorail station's 1st and Northeast G Street entrance, the Southwest Portico, the front of the station, and from Northeast A Street. New entrances will be located under the A Street Bridge, and head houses will be located on deck level on both sides of the A Street Bridge. Approximately 2.9 acres of private air rights will be needed to accommodate this project. The federal air rights above the rail terminal not needed for the project will be available for potential future transfer and development. The future development will consist of approximately 500,000 square feet of mixed uses. Speaking of mixed use, the station will have 64,000 square feet of retail space, along with 379,400 square feet of other mixed uses. Now for the price tag. This project will cost around $8.8 billion. Now, out of all the Washington Union Station redevelopment plans, I like this one the most. But with this type of price tag for all redevelopment projects for Washington Union Station, is it really worth it? I mean, the current Washington DC Union Station isn't ugly. It's not like a New York Penn Station type of vibe. For a station like New York Penn Station, it kind of made sense. I mean, it was kind of bad. I used to have nightmares of the low ceilings. I'm not even gonna lie. But even that project only cost $7 billion. And because this project is located in Washington, D.C., it will have to be massively federally funded. And if we're going to spend $9 billion on a project, why not spend it on something that will be more beneficial? If California High-Speed Rail got $9 billion, it would be fully funded. If BrightlineWest got $9 billion, it would be fully funded. Man, if you took $9 billion, you could electrify the entire Washington, D.C. to Richmond and extend high-speed rail services there. Actually, judging off the electrification costs from New Haven to Boston, electrification could possibly extend all the way to Raleigh, connecting the Northeast High-Speed Rail Corridor with the future proposed Southeast High-Speed Rail Corridor. This means high-speed electric trains from Atlanta to Boston. It's just, why are we spending $9 billion on a singular station that doesn't really need it? Welcome to Baltimore, Washington Thurgood Marshall International Airport Station. The station has 3 tracks, 2 side platforms, and sees limited service from Acela trains. This station is connected not directly to the airport, and its parking situation is... what parking? Keep it pushing, you car brain loser, is what we wish they would have said. 3,200 parking spots for you. And the cherry on top, nothing around the station. Keep it pushing, you urbanist loser, and take your Mark Acela train set with you.
Shout out Frederick Douglass.
So, what you're seeing here can only be described as a Mark F59 PHI with the pantograph pulling Superliner coaches behind it. Welcome to the Baltimore Potomac Tunnel. This is our second major Northeast Corridor improvement project after Union Station. I mean, aside from the Gateway program in New York and New Jersey, this is the highest profile project on the Northeast Corridor. The project will contain 2 new twin-board tunnels that will carry MARC and Amtrak trains into Baltimore Penn Station. The tunnels are named after Frederick Douglass after he used trains to escape slavery through Baltimore. The new tunnels will relieve traffic through the 150-year-old Baltimore and Potomac tunnels. Not only are these tunnels extremely old, but they're falling apart, so they require a lot of maintenance while still being kept in service, have tight curves and a slim loading gauge, so trains are limited to 30 miles per hour, and are double tracked, which creates some pretty nasty bottlenecks. The portal to the tunnels will be located just under the North Ave Light Rail Station. Then the tunnel will curve and meet the existing right-of-way at Lafayette Ave. The max speed in the new tunnel will be 110 miles per hour. Now, part of the Frederick Douglass Tunnel program, which is less talked about, are the non-tunnel parts. As you can see here on this map, it almost looks like the person drawing the green line got a little drunk halfway through. Unlike that horrible rendering we just saw, this is not a mistake. Amtrak genuinely plans to smoothen out the curves on this alignment. We can see the new alignment change in the new West Baltimore station renderings. Yes, this tunnel project also includes a new station at West Baltimore. The station will have longer platforms, be ADA accessible, and replace the older, obviously not ADA accessible station. Because this project is straightening the alignment, there are some property acquisitions that are involved, which means it's time to talk about the overall cost of this project. This project will cost around $6 to $7 billion, and be completed by 2035. The project is just barely fully funded, with Biden awarding it $4.5 billion. Now, this project has gotten a significant amount of opposition from local residents. arguing that this project would disproportionately negatively affect black residents, since the tunnel is under a majority black neighborhood. But I'd argue that all these impacts are extremely short term, as the negative impacts of disposing the rocks and soil will only happen during the time span of construction on the tunnels. And then there's a long-term complaint about the ventilation facility that's going to be placed across from a school, and I'd argue that that's a really valid complaint. However, the ventilation facilities will be used for the new tunnels, which will be for electric trains only, meaning there won't be any diesel exhaust being expelled from the ventilation facility. The ventilation facilities are only there in case there's a fire so people don't burn alive in the tunnel, which I'd argue is a really valid reason to have one. And of course, the largest complaint is the negative effects on property value. Now, I already explained how this project requires property acquisition, but most of this property acquisition is subterranean. So unless these residents are planning to build nuclear bunkers underneath their homes, these property acquisitions don't really affect them much, as this isn't displacement. Now, say if this tunnel weren't to get built, the Northeast economy as a whole would suffer, as Washington DC loses direct rail service connection to New York and Boston, meaning say goodbye to your property values anyways. Now, the thing I like about this project is not just the fact that they're building new infrastructure, but the fact that they're building new infrastructure to complement the older infrastructure. You see, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel was originally supposed to be quad-tracked, but the project got cut down to double-tracked because it didn't have a stable funding source. But even with the added capacity of the new double-track tunnel, Amtrak still realizes the potential for the old Baltimore and Potomac tunnel to be utilized. They can build a new tunnel, shut down the old tunnel for renovation, and then once completed, open up the older tunnel for slower commuter rail traffic. I mean, the tunnel is sandwiched between two stations. It's not like most commuter trains are going to reach high speeds on this section anyways. Speaking of these stations, let's look at Baltimore Penn. Baltimore, Pennsylvania Railroad Station actually just went under some recent renovations. Not only is the station's beautiful head house being renovated, but the platforms are being renovated too. Just at the start of this year, Amtrak opened up a new platform for Baltimore Penn Station, with another one scheduled for completion in the fall. Both of these platforms are high level and completely ADA accessible. And that's not all the plans that Amtrak has for the renovations for their station. See this parking lot right here? Well, Amtrak actually owns this land and is planning to redevelop it. Yup, that's correct. We only made it 43 miles and we're on to our next station redevelopment project. Let's take a look at the renderings. Right off the bat, I'ma tell you this. We're gonna ignore the TGV duplex seen here, here, and in here. I mean, this literally still has the SNCF logo on it. Anyways, this plan calls for a completely new head house and train hall on the opposite side of the station, which means the majority of passenger-oriented functions will be shifted to this train hall. The existing historic building will have its upper floors become office spaces, with the bottom floors hosting restaurants and retail spaces. The existing concourse over the train tracks will be used to connect the two station buildings together. This allows the existing historic building to still be used as an entrance to the station. The total estimated cost of the station itself is $251 million. Now, some of you may have seen the two giant translucent Lego pieces on the opposite side of the station. One of the buildings will be a commercial building with office spaces and retail, and the other one will be a private residential building. Though I'm not sure how private it will be since the building looks like the equivalence of living in a fish tank. Seriously though, these buildings look like the epitome of energy and efficiency. The building is all glass. I know that electricity bill gotta be something devious. I don't know if it's just me, but I hate how new buildings try to put green roofs and paint themselves as this green and clean energy efficient structure while burning through copious amounts of energy just to keep the building's temperature regulated due to its poor design. And I typically think these new modern buildings look cool, but these ones just seem out of place in contrast to the rest of the neighborhood. And if you want my personal opinions on these two structures outside the global climate change battle, because you know, I like to joke around this channel a lot, but sometimes we have to get serious. I think these two buildings will send the wrong message to the local neighborhood. I've talked about redlining and gentrification before in another video, and this section of West Baltimore is a historically black neighborhood. Build two glass monoliths that seem to disassociate themselves from the rest of the community, and I think you send the wrong message to the community about what public transportation means. And to be clear, I have no problem with the actual station redevelopment itself. It's just a giant office building and residential building that I'm concerned about. Alright, moving on. Before we hit Wilmington Station, we have 3 bridge replacements to talk about. The first one is the replacement of the Gunpowder River Bridge. The Gunpowder River Bridge is located in Chase, Maryland, is only double-tracked, and is over 110 years old. 2 new double-tracked bridge spans will replace it, and speeds on the new bridge will be increased to over 145 miles per hour. The project is estimated to cost $1.3 billion, with construction planned to begin in 2030 and be completed by 2036. The next bridge replacement is the Bush River Bridge in Perryman, Maryland. A fixed high-level quad-tracked bridge will replace this existing 110-year-old movable double-tracked bridge. The current bridge requires a 20-person crew during the summer to allow marine traffic to pass through, which will no longer be needed for the new, taller bridge. Speeds on the new bridge will be increased to 160 miles per hour. The bridge is estimated to cost $743 million, with construction planned for 2030 and being completed by September 2034. Next is the Susquehanna River Bridge replacement. This is the largest and oldest out of the 3 bridges at 117 years old. Now this bridge replacement is pretty interesting. Just like the other bridges, the original bridge will be replaced with 2 double-track spans. But unlike the other bridges, one span will be faster than the other. One span will be designed for 125 miles per hour, while the other one will be designed for 160. Either way, both of these spans will allow trains to travel faster than the current bridge's 90 mile per hour restrictions. The project is estimated to cost $2.7 billion and being completed in 2036. Now I like the way that Amtrak is approaching these infrastructure projects. They're not just replacing these bridges and tunnels, but they're making them better. Faster, more capacity, that's what I like to see. What I don't like to see is a 2036 construction completion date. From my understanding, this project is starting without being fully funded, so just like every other rail infrastructure project in the US, we really don't know what the finishing date is. If the project isn't fully funded, then it won't get built. So hopefully that explains why I'm a little bit skeptical about the Washington DC project. It's not that I don't think the project is amazing, but $9 billion? I'd argue that replacing this 100-year-old plus infrastructure is more important. We can make public transit look pretty, but we have to make it functional. The next stop is Wilmington Joe Biden Station. There's not really much going on here, other than some new escalators being built, so you could say the renovations for this station are kinda sleepy.
Oh, brother, this guy's...
Welcome to 30th Street Station in Philadelphia. When I was there, the station was actually really beautiful. It's kind of strange how small the station makes you feel. While I was there, I saw that there were plans to add a market and, I don't know, like a grocery, but nothing too crazy. Nah, just kidding, they plan to go absolutely insane with this one. This is the 30th Street Station District project. I don't even know if I really want to go over it fully because other than the small renovations that I just mentioned, there's not really any change happening to the station itself. New, absolutely massive skyscrapers that don't really fit into the neighborhood are going to be placed over the train yard. Again, this is a similar case to Baltimore, but like turned up to like 10,000. Speaking of 10,000, this new neighborhood would house 10,000 residents and 1.2 million square feet of commercial and office space, all at a cost of $6.5 billion, which I don't understand because the Washington Union Station project, a project that has a similar, but I'd even go as far as saying has a smaller scale, costs $9 billion. So somebody's a little bit off here. But again, it's another case of I'm really interested in these projects. I would like to see it get built, but maybe it requires a little bit more thought behind it. Now, an interesting story about Metro Park was that it first opened in 1971 as a park and ride stop for the then new high-speed Metroliners, hence the name Metro Park. This station has 2 high-level side platforms with 2 inner tracks. Now, Metro Park does get some decent ridership. According to Amtrak in 2022, Metro Park served 225,661 passengers that year. For reference, Trenton, the station that the Acela recently discontinued stopping at, serviced 254,694 passengers. which I'll admit is kind of impressive that Metro Park can put up similar numbers to Trenton, despite the Trenton station being located within the city and the Metro Park station being located in the middle of nowhere. Either way, Trenton had more riders, so it doesn't really explain why they would discontinue stopping at Trenton and continue having 2 trains a day in both directions stopping at Metro Park. Some New Jersey Transit trains don't even stop here. Simply put, the Acela should not be stopping here. I mean, this station is already served by the Northeast Regional. And one of the reasons why the Acela is so slow is because it has so many stops. Can I just take a moment and appreciate the TO for not point blank violating my ears and just giving the camera a friendly wave? Newark Penn Station has always been a weird station that's kind of difficult to navigate. Luckily, New Jersey Transit has plans to fix that. Currently, Newark Penn Station is going through the Vertical Circulation Improvement Project. This project includes the final design, construction to upgrade, rehabilitate, and replace 11 elevators and 17 escalators within Newark Penn Station. The project will improve accessibility and overall passenger circulation throughout the station, which serves Amtrak's Northeast Corridor services, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's Port Authority Trans-Hudson Transit Services, also known as PATH, and New Jersey Transit's commuter rail network and local transit services. This $59,200,000 project will be led by New Jersey Transit, but New Jersey Transit isn't doing too well right now. With federal support diminishing, New Jersey Transit is facing an approximately $100 million gap for the 2025 fiscal year and a $1 billion gap for the fiscal year of 2026. Now, the reason why New Jersey Transit is falling so far behind financially is because they've been spending a lot of their funding on the massive backlog of critical infrastructure projects they have. One of those projects is the Gateway Program. The purpose of the Gateway Program is to add capacity by adding more tracks, essentially using the "please just one more track bro" technique, a technique that should have been used decades ago, but thankfully is at least being used now. The Northeast Corridor in New Jersey, specifically between Newark Penn Station and New York Penn Station, has reached capacity. Unfortunately, a lot of these projects in the Gateway Program are not fully funded. Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey are the main sponsors of the Gateway Program. Unfortunately, all of them are severely underfunded, and this leaves projects like this next one we're coming up on at extreme risk of not being completed anytime soon. The first project on the Gateway Program is the Dock Bridge Rehabilitation. This is a $300,184,000 project led by Amtrak. The project includes the rehabilitation of the Dock Bridge, which crosses the Passaic River, separating Newark and Harrison, New Jersey. The 90-year-old, 6-track, steel through truss bridge will undergo repair of the structural steel, installation of straight steel rails to replace the movable midder rails, repair the concrete piers and fender replacement, and installation of targeted anti-corrosion protection system to slow or stop future degradation to the bridge structure. In other words, actually doing useful maintenance on the bridge after decades of neglect. This project will eliminate a cumulative 48 hours of annual train delays. The project will be completed in 2029. This is where our second Gateway Program is located. As you can see, the inner tracks, the Northeast Quarter tracks, have slimmed down into 3 tracks. The Harrison 4th Track Project will relocate a path track and signaling equipment further north to accommodate 4 tracks for the Northeast Corridor. This project is estimated to cost $141 million. This is where our third Gateway Program project is located. This project includes the replacement of the Sawtooth Bridge. These bridges are 116 years old. The current 1-mile 2-track bridge will be replaced by 2 new 2-track bridges. This way the Northeast Corridor can remain quad-tracked through this section. These new bridges will increase the operational speeds from 60 miles per hour to 90 miles per hour. The estimated cost of the project is $1.3 billion. The project is expected to be completed by 2035. New Jersey Transit and Amtrak are replacing the century-old Portal Bridge that carries trains over the Hackensack River. The existing bridge was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad and entered revenue service in November 1910. 450 trains use this bridge daily. Even if we unrealistically spread the trains across the entire day, including nighttime, that's a train crossing the bridge around every 3 to 4 minutes. Unfortunately, the current bridge is not just too old, but it's also too low, requiring it to be rotated in order to let larger vessels through. Due to the bridge's age and its constant need to be rotated, the bridge often breaks down and gets stuck in the open or shut position. This ends up creating hours of delays for Amtrak and New Jersey Transit customers. Fortunately, you may have noticed that the brand new viaducts for this new bridge are a lot taller than the existing ones. This allows for the new bridge to be a fixed bridge, increasing the overall reliability of the Northeast Corridor. The new bridge is nearly 2.5 miles long and provides 50 feet of clearance over the river, which is way better than the current 23 feet of clearance the existing bridge provides. Speeds on the existing bridge were lowered to 60 miles per hour due to a derailment in 1996, where two Amtrak trains sideswiped each other due to a misalignment in the tracks. On a good note, the new bridge will also be able to handle trains up to 90 miles per hour, instead of the current bridge's 60 mile per hour limit. The project is about a year ahead of schedule and is planned to be completed by 2027. This is what you get when you actually fully fund your projects. It should be noted that once this bridge is completed, a secondary 2-track bridge that's basically symmetric to it will be built alongside it, which will allow this section to match the quad tracking from the rest of the corridor and double capacity on the line. Here's the location of our 5th Gateway Program project. This is where a proposed project called the Bergen or Secaucus Loop will be located. This loop would allow New Jersey Transit's Main Line, Bergen County Line, Port Jefferson Line, and Pascack Line access to Penn Station. This would give riders on those lines a 1-seat ride into New York City, as currently they have to transfer here at Secaucus Junction. Overall, this plan was kind of funky considering that the trains would have to run through Secaucus Junction twice, which to me makes me wonder if this project was really worth it. In the end, this project would pretty much be put on the back burner for the other, what I'd call, more important projects. Overall, I don't know if the Bergen Loop will ever be completed soon, considering the fact that this project is a very, very, very low priority, and rightfully so. I can only really see this loop being useful for game day shuttles to MetLife Stadium, and the Giants and Jets suck anyways, so... Right now we're in the famous Portal Tunnel. These two tunnels alongside the Portal Bridge opened up in 1910 for service at Penn Station, and these tunnels have been through a lot, including Hurricane Sandy, which absolutely destroyed them. The salt water from the flooding has corroded almost every single inch of the tunnel, doing a number on the tracks, the concrete, and also the electrical equipment. New Jersey Transit and Amtrak trains have been dealing with massive delays up to 2 hours due to this dilapidated infrastructure. And these delays aren't pretty. Backed up overcrowded trains, overcrowded stations, and considering that Amtrak and New Jersey Transit are basically playing Russian roulette with the Portal Bridge, every time they open it and close it and open it and close it, this is a nightmare. This is why, along with the new Portal Bridge replacement, Amtrak and New Jersey Transit are planning to construct 2 new tunnels under the Hudson River. These 2 new tunnels will allow the Northeast Corridor to stay quad-tracked all the way into Penn Station. Trains would come off of a retainment field onto a viaduct, curve away from the current tunnel approaches, over Conrail, under Tunnelly Ave, and into the new tunnels. Work on the Tunnelly Ave overpass has already began, and is slated to be finished by 2026. Alright, if you're familiar with this area, you might have noticed that we're going a little bit off course. Alright, maybe not a little bit. This is where the existing tunnels are. And this is where the new tunnels are. What could they really be so scared of underneath that water that they would rather tunnel under Union City, damn near Hoboken, just to get around it? Could it be a military secret? An underground geothermal pool? A kaiju sleeping under the Hudson River waiting to attack New York? Property acquisition. It's property acquisition. So apparently 4 alignments were on the table, neither of them being straight and direct, due to lack of suitable locations for a ventilation facility, and the fact that the pre-built tunnel blocks for this project in Manhattan under the Hudson Yards comes at an angle. Option 4, the option they're going with, that has the longest tunnel, requires the least amount of property acquisition, so even though the initial cost and time for the tunneling is more expensive and longer than the other alternatives, it faces the least chance of pushback. which basically means it's the one they had the most public confidence in. In the study, there was no significant time increase found with this alignment, which I mean, sure. I think most riders would take anything over the original tunnels at this point. Anyways, once in Manhattan, there's another ventilation facility. Then we entered the Hudson Yard's concrete casing, the train box that's been sitting around for this project for several years by now, and finally connecting with the rest of the tracks into Penn Station. Once these tunnels are built, the old ones that we're traveling through right now will be shut down one by one for rehabilitation. Once the rehabilitation is completed, the tunnels will reopen, allowing for 4 tracks into Penn Station. Service levels will not increase once the new tunnels are built and the old ones are rehabilitated due to the lack of capacity in Penn Station, which on the downside means no increased levels of train service, but on the upside means that with the additional tunnels and the current max level of trains into Penn Station during rush hour, basically there will be the same number of services through the Hudson River Tunnels during rush hour, but faster, which I think is a good start. Speaking of lack of capacity at Penn Station, let's talk about the Penn Station expansion project. Let's start off with the station approach. The Empire Service track approach into the station will need to be lowered in order to meet the profile of the new Hudson River Tunnels. This will allow for a new L ladder to be built so that trains from the new Hudson River Tunnel could reach all platforms of the station. This is guaranteed. What isn't guaranteed is Penn Station South, which occupies a block south of the current Penn Station, between 7th and 8th Avenue. This city block is currently occupied by private development and would need to be completely raised in order to build the expansion to the station, which, one, this property acquisition would be really expensive, over $1 billion, and 2, people aren't that happy about this proposal. So I'm not quite sure if this will ever happen actually. However, that doesn't mean that New Yorkers didn't want to see any change to Penn Station, since Penn Station, after its catastrophic destruction, was well known by New Yorkers as a rat hole. A very uncomfortable place that you didn't really want to be there for too long, sort of just get on your train and get out of there. And that's the Penn Station I grew up with. I'm pretty tall, and I vividly remember me having a nightmare of the low ceilings in the station. I remember walking down the concourse and the ceiling slowly getting lower and lower and lower, to the point where I had to crawl on my knees. So if that doesn't say anything about the old Penn Station, I don't know what will. There were also a string of minor derailments in Penn Station, including an Acela in 2017, due to deferred track maintenance. Obviously, a lot has changed with the renovated one. The signage is clearer, the tracks are actually being worked on, the ceilings are higher in some places, and the concourses are brighter, again, in some places. This is all taking billions of dollars and decades to complete, and in some places you can still see the old Penn Station coming out, which makes sense because the station is underground, constrained by Madison Square Garden, and massive. But I'd say you could already feel the capacity improvements with the new renovations, especially with the added capacity in the Moynihan Train Hall. Now there are even more plans and renderings for Penn Station. You have major architecture firms battling each other, and you have Trump's federal government battling New York State's MTA, a battle between classical revival and modernism. But I personally think that the station has received enough federal funding and the station is fine. It could be better, yes, but at least it's not as hideous as it used to be. I'd argue that these billions of dollars in federal money would better off be spent on the 100-year-old bridge replacements that we've talked about, and the ones we have still yet to talk about.
This is 130-year-old steel. Oh, whoa.
The East River Tunnel Rehabilitation Project is a project run by Amtrak. The tunnels are used by Amtrak's Northeast Corridor services, the Long Island Railroad, and New Jersey Transit trains deadheading to Sunnyside Yard. It is also important to note that Amtrak's Empire Corridor services also use the tunnels to deadhead into Sunnyside Yard. This makes for a total of 400 daily trains. The 100-plus-year-old structure has 4 tracks, and this project will fund full rehabilitation of track 1 and 2, with the installation of a new direct fixation track, traction power, drainage systems, signals, communication systems, and fire and life safety upgrades throughout the entire tunnel. Currently, the tunnels use ballasted tracks. The new direct fixation system will fasten the rails directly to the sleepers, lowering the overall maintenance of the tracks. The damage to the tunnels from Superstorm Sandy will be fully remediated, returning tracks 1 and 2 into a state of good repair, and preparing the tunnels to accommodate future growth. In order to do this, the tunnels will be deconstructed down to the concrete lining, and reconstructed with the modern system. The project will cost $1.6 billion. $55 million will come from Amtrak, $175 million will come from MTA, and $85 million will come from New Jersey Transit. with an agreed upon $432 million coming from the state of New York. The federal government will match the funds for the rest of the project. The estimated completion date is 2027. The Herald Interlocking Project is a project led by the MTA. This project will improve the reliability and travel time for the existing Amtrak service between New York and Boston by providing a conflict-free route through Herald Interlocking, the busiest switch point on the Northeast Corridor. The project scope includes the construction of the westbound bypass and the eastbound reroute, which will create grade-separated routes between New York Penn Station and the Hell's Gate line. The project will also modify and reconstruct the Sunnyside Yard loop track. The total cost of the project is $1.4 billion and is expected to be completed by 2028. This project was actually supposed to be completed pre-pandemic. The reason for the 2028 construction completion date is because the Long Island Railroad's MTA and Amtrak couldn't agree on train scheduling. As you can see, Amtrak and the various commuter rail authorities can get pretty territorial, especially when it comes to reduced scheduling or using each other's infrastructure. Sometimes the two parties just don't play ball, which is something not a lot of urbanists talk about, but something you should keep in mind for the rest of the video, as there will be countless examples of this. Sunnyside Yard was recently upgraded at a cost of $140 million in order to handle Tier 3 high-speed rail vehicles. The old Acela train sets were Tier 2, the new ones are Tier 3, so the upgrade is mandatory. The Penn Access Project is a project led by the MTA. The proposed project includes the final design and construction to comprehensively rehabilitate 19 miles of the Amtrak-owned Hell's Gate line, connecting New York Penn Station to New Rochelle. Benefits to Amtrak intercity services from the project include upgraded signal systems, rehabilitation of 4 bridges, construction of 4 new interlockings, and 5 new power substations, with upgrades to the existing 2 on the line. Additional project components include the expansion to the New Rochelle Yard and construction of new Metro North stations on the line. The main goal of this project is to restore the Hellgate line to a state of good repair and allow the introduction of new Metro North commuter rail service over the Hell's Gate line in order to finally bring Metro North service into Penn Station. The total cost of the project is $2.6 billion, with the expected completion date to be 2027. The Pelham Bay Bridge replacement is an Amtrak-led project, which will replace the existing 115-year-old 2-track movable span structure with a new 2-track bridge. The new bridge will increase speeds from 45 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour, reduce bridge openings by 76%, and increase reliability. The total cost of the project is $716 million and has a completion date of 2034. The Connecticut portion of the Northeast Corridor is hands down the worst section of the rail line. The infrastructure is old and crumbling, the right-of-way and tracks are slow and winding, and the line is over capacity. It's gotten to the point where people have started to create, in my opinion, these absurd proposals to turn the LIRR main line into a high-speed rail line and tunnel high-speed rail tracks under the Long Island Sound to New Haven, simply to avoid this section. Like, how is that supposed to solve the problem? The main problem is Amtrak doesn't own this section between New Rochelle and New Haven. That section is split between the MTA and the Connecticut Department of Transportation at the New York border, which means it's in the control of the states to upgrade their infrastructure. So how would building an extremely complicated high-speed rail line on MTA property again be the solution? I mean, even as a transit enthusiast sometimes, transit enthusiasts be losing me. But anywho, what if I told you that the state of Connecticut has plans to reduce the travel time between New Haven and New York by 25 minutes before 2035? Are you ready? Because you're about to hear a lot of... Alright, let's go. The New Haven Line Power Improvement Program is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The proposed project includes the final design and construction to replace 7 substations and the associated power equipment on the New Haven line from the New York border to New Haven, Connecticut, as the existing substations are not in a good state of repair and pose a significant risk of disruptions to intercity and commuter services along the New Haven line. The total cost of the project is $200 million. Connecticut will provide $21 million, with Amtrak providing $10 million. The rest is backed by the federal government. The Cos Cob Bridge replacement is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. This project will replace the existing Cos Cob Bridge that carries 4 tracks over the Meannes River in Greenwich, Connecticut. The total cost of this project is $2.7 billion. The project completion date is 2040. The Stamford Catenary Improvement Project is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. This project will upgrade and replace the catenary around Stamford. The project includes lowering the existing catenary and catenary improvements to the Stamford Yard. The total cost of the project is $85 million. The entire station area of Stamford would be completely renovated as well. The Connecticut Department of Transportation is leading a $350 million project to increase pedestrian safety, accessibility, and foster more efficient land use around the station. The Moynihan Train Hall in New York was listed as one of the station's inspirations for redevelopment, as wayfinding will play a key factor in the new Stamford station. The Walk Bridge replacement is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The proposed project includes the construction to replace the existing Walk Bridge, a 127-year-old 4-track, 4-span, movable bridge over the Norwalk River in Norwalk, Connecticut. The new bridge will be multi-span and will include 240-foot dual-lift spans over the waterway with fixed east and west approach spans. The scope of the project also includes embankment work, retaining walls, removal of high towers, rerouting transmission wires, a new fender system, and track upgrades. The track upgrades over this bridge will increase the speeds from 30 miles per hour to 45. The total cost of this project is $1 billion. The state of Connecticut will provide $87 million, while Amtrak will provide $29 million. The federal government will chip in $580 million, which still leaves a funding gap. The estimated completion date is November 2029. The Sagatuck River Bridge replacement is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The proposed project includes the replacement of the existing Sagatuck River Bridge over the Sagatuck River in Westport, Connecticut. The span is 118 years old, 480-foot, 4-track, movable bascule bridge. This project will increase operational speeds from 45 miles per hour to 90. The total cost of the project is $580 million. The project completion date is 2033. The New Haven Track Improvement and Mobility Enhancement Project, or TIME, is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The proposed project includes track improvements in Stratford, Connecticut. The project involves the reconstruction of 7 rail overpass bridges, upgrading all the tracks to FRA Class 6 standards, track realignments, installation of a new interlocking, replacement of catenary system components, and rail bed drainage improvements. With all this, the project will increase the maximum speed in the area from 70 miles per hour to 90. The total cost of the project is $932 million. The Devon River Bridge replacement is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The proposed project includes replacement of the 118-year-old Devon River Bridge, connecting Stratford and Milford, Connecticut. Speeds on the bridge will increase from 40 miles per hour to 70. The federal government will chip in the full $3 billion construction cost for the project. The project completion date is scheduled for August 2036. The 4th Mainline project at Milford is another project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. This project will reintroduce a 4th track at Milford Station in order to increase capacity on the New Haven line. The total cost for this project will be $95 million. The city of New Haven has a plan to develop the surface parking lot next to the station into a high-rise, 16th-floor apartment building, which will have retail on the bottom floor and 470 units for rent, 25% of which will be affordable housing, with the west side of the station becoming a multimodal hub, or whatever that means. It really just looks like a large parking structure. They say there's supposed to be bus bays or a bus turnaround facility on the ground level, but that's not really depicted in the renderings. But like, if you know New Haven, there's a giant abandoned parcel of land just outside the station. I mean, an absolutely massive amount of real estate outside of a station that just so happens to be the busiest in the state of Connecticut. I mean, as a New Yorker, I'm kind of lost for words here. The good news, I guess, is the fact that the city has been planning to redevelop this land for years now in order to turn it into a walkable neighborhood with bike lanes and townhouses and parks. But yeah, like I said, it's been going on for years now, and I'm not really sure about the process of where they're at right now with this project. Now, when I was riding the Acela in real life, we stopped at New Haven for 15 minutes because we were 15 minutes ahead of schedule, which means that there was an extra 15 minutes of schedule padding for the service. And this is why I say that the Acela isn't actually that slow. Amtrak just makes it slow because the infrastructure on the corridor is extremely old and unreliable, meaning that at any moment there could be a catenary outage, or one of the 100-year-old movable bridges doesn't shut all the way, meaning that if you replace it with newer infrastructure, it could allow it to be more reliable, which means that Amtrak can reduce the schedule padding in their services. This is why these bridge replacements, even upgrading the tracks from 40 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour, will drastically reduce the travel times. One of these 100-year-old movable bridge replacement projects that we have is the Connecticut River Bridge Replacement. This project will construct a new 2-track electrified movable bridge over the Connecticut River. The new bridge will have new tracks, new signals, new catenary, and new communication and control features. The new bridge structure is expected to have a useful lifespan of 100 years and will replace the existing 2-track 1907 built Connecticut River Bridge. The new bridge will enhance reliability, resilience, and reduce delays for all users of the bridge. It is designed to support a maximum speed of 70 miles per hour, a 55% increase over the current maximum speed of 45 miles per hour. The new bridge will also have a higher vertical clearance, allowing for increased maritime navigation, without the bridge having to be opened as much as the original. The estimated cost for the new bridge is $1 billion, and is scheduled to be completed in 2031, with Amtrak being the main sponsor for the project. This is because the Connecticut Department of Transportation only owns the tracks from the Connecticut-New York border to New Haven. Amtrak owns the rest from New Haven to the Rhode Island-Massachusetts border. Speaking of Rhode Island, there's a capacity improvement study between New Haven and Rhode Island to increase service from 2 trains per hour to 8. This will most likely be done with the implementation of more Amtrak service and new extended commuter rail service, which will probably see the MBTA in partnership with the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and the Connecticut Department of Transportation Shoreline East Rail Line extend and connect at Westerly. This would mean that theoretically somebody could take commuter rail from Newark, Delaware, all the way up to Boston, Massachusetts. And with the Amtrak improvements in the state of Maryland, extending MARC commuter rail service to Newark, Delaware, a person could ride from Washington, D.C. to Boston solely on commuter rail. Would that trip be expensive? Yes. Would it be practical? No. Would I still want to see it? Yes. But in order for this to happen, just like in Maryland, additional tracks would need to be added in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. Now, to be clear, the MBTA does own the right-of-way of the Northeast Corridor in Massachusetts, but Amtrak dispatches it, built the catenary, and maintains the track and signaling systems. Hence the reason why MBTA still runs diesels under the wires, like scared little cave people. Using Amtrak-owned power, catenary, and substations would mean that the already very underfunded MBTA would have to pay Amtrak to use them. This is why the MBTA opted to go with their weird hybrid plan to operate bi-mode locomotives that run on catenary and battery power when not under the wires.
What the hell?
The Madison, Connecticut Station Northeast Corridor On-Time Performance Capacity Improvement Project, wow, what a name, is a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. This project will create a new Track 1 for platform service at Madison Station, essentially making the main line 3 tracks. Because as it's set up right now, Shoreline East commuter trains have to stop on the main line in order to pick up passengers at Madison. This station is sort of weird because it only has one side platform, and there's a mandated project from an agreement with the Connecticut Department of Transportation and Amtrak to upgrade the station to 2 side platforms, so I'm not sure how that's all going to pan out in the end. My hope is that they just future-proof the station and add a 4th track. The Clinton, Connecticut Station Northeast Corridor On-Time Performance Capacity Improvement Program, they really need to get better with these names, it's a project led by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Essentially, it will do the same thing as the Madison one. But you know what's funny about this station? That 2003 agreement between Amtrak and the Connecticut Department of Transportation to build 2 platforms on all Shoreline East rail line stations in order to increase rail service for those stations? Yeah, well, they didn't plan for the future. They actually built the platforms on the main line themselves. So now we have a project with freshly built platforms that need to be demolished. Oh man. Anyways, there goes $12.5 million down the drain for the Clinton station. Next stop is the TF Green Airport Station in Warwick, Rhode Island. An additional track and side platform will be added to the station, allowing 2 MBTA trains to be at the station simultaneously. Luckily, this station was built with some type of foresight, as the extra track and platform will be an easy addition. Shout out to the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. Welcome to Providence Station. Providence Station is actually relatively new when compared to the other stations on the Northeast Corridor that we've talked about. The station was built in 1986 in order to replace the existing Providence Union Station, located further south. The new station is located quote-unquote new station is located right outside the state's Capitol building. Unfortunately, unlike the Capitol building's dome you see here, the station building's dome is prone to leaks, so that's going to be replaced. On top of that, the train hall is going to be expanded with added seating capacity, something that the Moynihan Train Hall in New York desperately needs. And the restrooms will also be expanded. And this is good because let me just say this. The former Providence Union Station still exists to this day. It's actually a historic site. And it looks a lot better than Providence's current Amtrak station. I'm not calling the newer station an Amshack, but you know, they could have done a little bit better. The problem with the older station was that it was elevated, so it did divide up downtown Providence. But it's not like the city of Providence didn't just build I-95 split right through their downtown with a giant interchange at the heart of it. With that being said, Providence Station is the 11th most busiest station for Amtrak in the nation, but it's still a lot smaller than its predecessor, with only 5 tracks and 2 island platforms. One of the tracks is unelectrified for freight service. This is a huge decrease down from its predecessor's 11 tracks and 7 platforms. But this is due to the fact that the predecessor station had more rail service. The good news is, after all the tracks and the yards were removed from that rail station, a lot of TOD was built in its place. The next project is the Attleboro Area Northeast Corridor Section On-Time Performance Capacity Improvement Project. This project is sponsored by the MBTA and includes the electrification of track 4 and 3 from Thatcher to Holden, as well as raising the max speed to 80 miles per hour. Another one. There's going to be a third track added from Canton Junction to Reedville, but I'm not sure whether or not this third track would continue through Canton Junction or would start at the interlocking itself. Ideally, the third track would go through the station as a bypass track, which wouldn't be too crazy of a job since the station's getting redeveloped itself. Again, plan for the future. I don't understand why the Acela stops at Route 128. I get that there's a lot of suburban residents that drive here, but this seems more like a Northeast regional type of station. Especially with the new Aero train sets coming in, there's no excuse for the Acela to stop here. Boston Back Bay is going to see a ventilation project, as well as some renovations to their concourse and bathrooms, with improvement to lighting and wayfinding. Leaving Boston Back Bay Station, we only have 2 projects left. One of them is the Tower 1 interlocking, which is just at the approach of Boston South Station. This approach will be redesigned in order to handle the increased level of rail traffic proposed. Last, and certainly not least, we end off on a cliche Northeast Corridor project. Is it A, a catenary improvement project, B, a bridge replacement project, C, a rail tunnel connecting Boston South Station and Boston North Station, or D, a station redevelopment project? If you answered D, a station redevelopment project, you answered correctly, though I think we all wish it was C. There's a project sponsored by the MBTA to redevelop Boston South Station. The current bus terminal over Boston South Station will be expanded. The new bus terminal will increase capacity by more than 50% and will provide more convenient connections to train and subway, is what they wrote. And looking at the diagram for the new floor layout, it looks pretty good. And just north of it on top of the station, there will be a new mixed-use tower called the South Station Tower. This is the first phase of a 3-building development of airspace above Boston South Station and will provide approximately 700 square feet of office space and 166 residential condominium units. The Phase 2 building will be a residential and hotel building built above the expansion of the bus terminal. It will include 440,000 square feet of space and an additional 368 parking spaces. The third and final building will be a 510 square foot building with office space and amenity space above the existing bus terminal structure. Across all 3 phases, there will be 1.98 million square feet of mixed-use space, alongside an additional 895 parking spaces. An unrelated project is the South Station Expansion Project. This project dates all the way back to 2010, when there was a $32.5 million grant from the federal government to begin planning for the expansion to the station. The justification for the expansion was that Boston South Station was at capacity. The problem is, a relocation of the Boston General Mail facility would need to take place in order for the expansion to be possible, seeing that 7 more tracks would have been added to the existing 13. The total cost of the project was $4.7 billion. The thing is, most people oppose this project and would rather see the North-South rail link be built, and I am one of those people. The thing is, a 4-track North-South rail link would cost $21.5 billion, and a double track would cost $12.3 billion to $14.7 billion. So, yeah. not the cheapest alternative. The reason for this is because 3 new underground stations would need to be built. One underneath South Station, one underneath North Station, and an intermediate station that connects to the MBTA Blue Line, dubbed the Central Station. It's really the stations that make this 1.5 mile long tunnel that expensive. The reality of the situation is, this should have all been built during the Big Dig. They put the entirety of I-93, which runs parallel to both stations, underground, and didn't even bother putting a rail connection with it. Another example where cost-cutting measures go wrong. So what are my final thoughts on the Acela? Well, unlike the California High-Speed Rail Explain video or the Brightline Explain video, there already is a culture within this region of people taking rail between the cities. I mean, Amtrak literally has a 54% rail-to-air travel market share for travel between Boston and New York, and 83% between New York and Washington. So while the American car culture and air travel culture still exists in the region, it's not as extreme as you would see in Florida or California. And because Amtrak is a federal company and these infrastructure improvements require extensive federal funding, since a lot of them cross state borders, which remember this is essentially like country borders, and also take place in smaller, weaker states in comparison to like a California or Florida, which means these infrastructure improvements being built largely relies on the rest of the country approving them, which is difficult when the rest of the country hasn't fully grasped the importance of rail travel. So what can you do? Well, if you got this far in the video, you can put hashtag I finished it, and I'll award you with a heart on your comment for your excellent and nowadays very rare attention span. But besides that, I think it's good to use the Acela as a baseline for what high-speed rail in America looks like. That way we can build better and faster ones. But other than that, I don't know. This really just comes down to Amtrak's poor marketing of high-speed rail outside the Northeast Corridor. They just haven't been spending any effort doing that in the 21st century, which I think is the real tragedy out of everything we've talked about this video. Anyways, if I earned your like and subscription, I love you. And if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching.
The Northeast Corridor continues to be the most heavily traveled route in the country. It is here that Amtrak has already proven that high-speed rail, even on a modest level, can be successful.
If you can speed up transportation, you speed up productivity, you speed up the effectiveness of your economy, and you speed up your standard of living. And every American I know would be like to be riding in the train we're riding in at the moment. You're not going to ride in this train based on free enterprise in the United States. No such train will ever exist without government involvement. They can't be brought off simply by a private company.
Why hasn't the American government been investing in infrastructure?
Well, I think the answer is ever since the 1960s, we've simply let infrastructure in the United States slide. And I think that is the great American mystery.